delighted to have Melissa Lever, Head of Reward and HR Systems at the Magic Circle law firm Linklaters with us today. I've known Melissa for many years and always really value her forward-looking view of reward and benefits. And it's particularly interesting that she's a head of reward, but she's also head of HR systems. And it's about this latter responsibility that I want to have a chat to her today. So welcome, Melissa. Lovely to see you.
Hi.
Melissa, with your HR systems hat on, what kind of data are you finding most important right now?
I think that the most important data for us right now is our diversity data. I think that's really key. And I think mainly it's key because we're looking at measuring it through so many different strands of HR, from recruitment through to rewards, talent and performance and future pipeline, even to the point of resource allocation and where we parcel out our work. Gender's been on the table for quite some time now, and we've been looking at that, along with ethnicity where we can. And obviously, the events of last year have really, driven that to the fore. What we're really looking at it is not just being able to measure things and have a collection of statistics, but really how we use that data to drive our strategy and help make the right decisions for our business. And I think we're finding, some really interesting areas there in terms of, just how we can use that data, how we can encourage our people to give us that data and use it to drive those decisions and really dig underneath that data, whilst at the same time ensuring that our people are comfortable for us to use it for the right purposes, to give that data for the right reasons. Because obviously once you dig underneath it, you're getting to more than that aggregated data. And I don't think we've got the solution yet, but it's probably our most live and active issue that we're considering in terms of our data.
And on that, if I can ask you a question, have you found, you talked about people being comfortable giving data. How are you tackling that? Because I know a number of employers just feel that might not be a good area to go down. Are people giving you the information you need? How are you reassuring them about the data and how you're using it?
So far we've had a really good response rate for our data. I think if we can get people early on in their career at Linklaters, so they're used to giving that data to us, that's really helpful rather than to encouraging them. So we're looking at trying to get that data as early as possible in their Linklaters journey. We are still on a journey. We've got a really great response rate at the moment, but we are using it still in that aggregated way. What we're trying to tackle ourselves is, when you start interrogating that data, you need to make that data, you need to understand who are the people who are being affected. So what we're trying to do is or the issues we're considering are how we do that in a way that doesn't make people worried or destroy their data. So whether that's having a two-tier privacy notice, one for those who are just comfortable on an aggregated basis and one for otherwise. We're thinking about those things. We haven't done anything yet because it's so important to get this right and make sure that we don't take a rash step which will actually send us backwards. So we're really considering all those issues, but that, as I said, is probably the most live issue for us at the moment.
Yeah. And I guess as you get good examples and people can see the benefit of it, that might help going forward as well.
Yeah, and we're testing it with our groups, our diversity groups and forums internally, and trying to evidence that we're wanting this for positive purposes. But it is a very, very complicated subject, and we haven't got the answer just yet.
Absolutely, I think as an industry we're having to work and learn from each other and work together to get to where we want to do. And as you say, it's all for the positive, not for the negative. And we're talking about looking ahead, and you said you're on a journey. So what sort of things will you be looking at for in the year ahead?
I think one of the things that is causing us, and I'm sure a lot of other organisations around the world, a bit of a pain point at the moment, is being able to track where our people are in the world, particularly due to the events of the last year. So when COVID hit and everybody went into lockdown, we weren't alone in having people stranded in places in the world where they weren't their primary work location and where they potentially couldn't work and where they needed to get home to. And I think that's not going to get better once COVID's gone and travel restrictions lift. I think in many ways people will become more of an issue. So we'll have Brexit, there'll be increased needs for visas, for things where people are used to just getting on a plane and going somewhere. We've implemented a formal agile working policy during COVID, where people can spend up to 50% of their time outside of the office. So again, come the summer, hopefully, if travel restrictions lift, people will be thinking about moving, maybe spending time abroad or in different locations, and all the tax issues, the regulatory issues, and the travel restriction issues that brings with it. So we're trying to get ahead of the game before we get to that. But I think that will become a real issue for us that we need to focus on in the next few months.
Yeah, so much data to collect there, and ability for people to say where they are, and to have that some sort of system that HR can easily reference and refer to. I can see that being pretty crucial. Yeah, you're dealing with quite a lot of data all the time, and it's interesting that you and your team analyse your own data. And I'm very interested to know why you think it makes more sense, why it's more advantageous for you to do your own data, and what advice you might give other reward and HR teams who are maybe feeling a bit intimidated by doing their own data. Why would you do it yourself and get yourself skilled up to do it?
Well, I think I'm very lucky that I've got a team that is able to analyse their data. But I think the biggest advantage for us is that we know our own data and we know our own business. So when you need to marry those two things up, I don't think there is any substitute for doing it yourself. So if you outsource this, you'll get a range of outcomes back to you, but you won't necessarily know what's driven those outcomes and what interventions will actually do anything to change what you do in the future. So the example I always give is gender pay. There are so many different variables that all feed into one single number that pops out of the system at the other end. And that number goes up and down every year. And there's so many different reasons why that number may do that. And without knowing what you fed in and what were the bits that actually caused that number to change, you don't know whether you've got a problem. If you do have a problem, what you should do about it, whether it's something which you can communicate to your business about, that it's not something to worry about. It was a feature of a business. Say, for example, if you outsource people or insource people, and that dramatically changed the number. So to really be able to tell that narrative and translate that number into a conversation with your business, you need to be able to understand that number. So I think that's where we're coming from, and that's why we want to analyse these things ourselves. The other point I think I'm quite conscious of is that if you've got the means to analyse it, you can do things and intervene in a lot quicker and a lot more real time. So with our annual year-end process on the reward side, we've set up analysis that can either be done sometimes in absolute real time as the decisions around reward are being made, or can be done very quickly to highlight any potential issues before those decisions are signed off. And we would have to go back and reopen them. So just doing it yourself, you can set up these small interventions which just help the process along and catch anything that could be a problem or flag anything not in real time, but in close to real time. So it's much easier to get those decisions, analysed and checked and be comfortable with your outcomes if you do it closer to the point of the decision.
And I guess there, Melissa, you might be talking about things like unconscious bias. We all have unconscious bias. I think anybody who says they don't is unaware rather than not really having it. And I think it's so important these days to make sure that there aren't any form of unconscious bias coming into any decision you make at all, be it hiring, be it bonuses, be it pay. And I think, and that data will tell you if something needs a closer look. I think we've talked about this before, haven't we? It doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong, but at least you can kick the tires on it and go, why is that? popping up, and data tells you that.
That's absolutely right. I think, with our data, we will look at it in our team and we'll look at it with our HR colleagues, and where we can, obviously, without looking at it on an individual level, we will flag issues that look a little bit odd. And sometimes those decisions go back and get revisited. And sometimes there's a perfectly good reason for it, and it's odd but fine. But it does mean that we can go into the communication with our people confident that has been looked at and that those decisions have all been flagged and understood before they've been signed off. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's crucial for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Data is so vital for that sort of business risk element, and it's the stuff you don't see that becomes so important. Melissa, for teams that do want to capture and analyse their own data, what advice would you give them about how to go about this?
I think my main advice is to start small and manageable. I think there's a tendency to try and capture everything, and you end up with so much information you don't know what to do with it. So work out what the issue is that you're trying to solve. Work out what you need to do to analyse that. And I think the big question for me as well is, if you find that there's an issue coming out of that, or it confirms exactly what you think, what are you going to do about it that's different from what you did before? Because if you don't have an answer to that, don't analyse it. That's not going to help you. I think from our perspective, my teams that analyse that, whether that's my systems team or my reward team, work so closely with our HR colleagues globally, and they work hand in glove with them. So again, I don't think you can do this in isolation. You need to be able to understand what's going on in your business and how the relevance of reward impacts on other bits of the HR, of the people business, to understand and get to the nub of what you need to analyse. So yeah, I think start small, understand where you're going with it, and talk to your HR colleagues before you start. I think that would be my main advice.
And switching sort of from the data side to more the actual HR systems, and with your HR systems hat on, what kind of trends are you seeing in HR technology strategy? What's changing?
Right. I think for us, what's really important for us is to reflect on the good things that might have come out of the last year and harness them. So going into last year, everybody had to adapt super quick. Everybody, things that might have taken years to get over the line just happened, like an agile working policy. And to the extent that we can harness those into the future new world, I'm really keen to capitalise on that. So for us in particular, I think it's looking at how the new world of working will be once we start returning to the office, understanding it won't be the same as it was before, and understanding what technology will help drive a better experience. So I think, I think most organisations are at a point where there's an understanding that we won't all go back to the offices they were before, and teams will be dispersed, and we're all used to working on Zoom now. But things like being able to do really agile pulse surveys, sentiment analysis to gauge the mood of an organisation when they're not all just sitting in the office having a chat. Those things are still quite hard, and people have been working very hard at checking in with teams individually, but you don't see that on that sort of corporate-wide basis. And I think those sorts of technologies will be something which I think could be very interesting going forward. The other trend I would see it's maybe not a trend in the basis that this was happening anyway, but that move to employee self-service and chatbots, etc., I think will continue to take off. But I think maybe the difference is that whereas before it was all about maybe efficiency and saving HR time, I think it's going to maybe flip more to what the user experience is like. So we all know that people maybe are trying to access information at different times, maybe at different points of the day, certainly not necessarily running to their HR person in the office and asking them a question. And so having that information at their fingertips in a way that they can consume and is really easy for them to interact with, I think will become the way of the future. And I think that was always what we wanted anyway from my side, but it was quite hard convincing people to do it. Whereas now we're almost there anyway. So let's try and capitalise on that and make it work as well as we can.
Yeah, it's so crucial, as you say, for this user experience where we now work in a world that's so fluid and so flexible as to when and where you work, that to have something available at your fingertips 24/7 is just, it's got to be the future, hasn't it? And my last question is looking at, in an ideal world, if you could have whatever you wanted from an HR system or benefits technology, what would it be? What do you think's missing out there? And the needs of HR people, whether it's real or fantasy, how could they be better met?
Well, I think when you go to HR tech fairs and reward fairs, it's almost hard to find anything that's missing. It seems that there's a solution for everything these days, and there's such a big variety out there. But what always hits me is you go around and you're like, yeah, that would be great, that would be great, that would be great. But each of them needs a business case. Each of them needs to be connected up to your core system. It becomes just a bit too hard to be able to get all of these things in one place, even though a lot of them are fulfilling a gap in the market. So for me, my wish list would be that ease of connectivity, and really having a system where it almost works like the App Store on your phone, and you can say, that's right for me, I'll buy that one, and it's already pre-approved. You can almost download it and get it onto your core system without all the year-long business case to get you there. I think some of the bigger developers, I believe, are moving in that direction. So maybe it will be the thing of the future. But I think that would be just amazing. It comes back down to that connectivity issue as well. We're also increasingly wanting to analyse data across different platforms. So putting your finance data with your performance data, or your learning data with your talent data, and being able to pull it all into one place, again, to me, will be the thing that we're going to want to do in the future, that we probably could do now if we had an unlimited budget and unlimited time. But if we could do that very easily, that would be such a powerful thing for us.
Absolutely. I'm hearing it from so many people, that need for that connectivity. It's like the holy grail that people haven't got to yet. And once that starts to happen for real, that could change HR and reward fundamentally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it's been really fascinating talking to you and just getting an insight into sometimes what you might think of almost the engine of HR, the systems and the data, but so crucial, without which we couldn't do anything. So thank you so much for your time today, Melissa. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.